Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about how to build a cybersecurity portfolio that connects your work to the job that you want. We're going to be using GitHub because it gives you a free place to organize that work and make it public. The slide's going to carry the exact setup, so I'm going to focus on the decisions behind it and how they all fit together. Now, if you want this presentation or any of the information in it, I'm going to have a link in the description below, and if you're on TikTok, it's going to be in the comments. Now, we're going to get started with what the portfolio is supposed to accomplish. Now, a portfolio is what it really does is just give an employer more context after they read your application. It shows what you worked on, what you concluded, and whether you can kind of explain how you got there. What it doesn't do is necessarily replace experience or get you through an applicant tracking system with ease. It really only becomes useful when a person wants to look closer at what you do and actually gets your hands on that application. Usually it's around round 1 to 2 that they really start looking at this stuff, which means that the finished portfolio needs to be built around how that person is going to use it. Now, the person reviewing it should be able to see your direction and reach your strongest project with about 2 clicks. Your profile and homepage guide them there, while the project page holds all of the detail. If someone has to search through your entire account, the route is too complicated or too specific. But making the route shorter only works when it has a clear direction. So we need to really choose the job before we build the website. To do that, what you're going to do is use current job postings to make that choice. Basically, job titles and tools vary between companies, but repeated responsibilities show what the role is actually expected to handle. As several job postings mention documenting, alert findings, for example, that points towards an investigation project that ends in a report. The posting is no longer just describing a job, it is helping you decide what to build. Now, those responsibilities can become the standard for what belongs in the portfolio. So let's kind of talk about that. Now, for each responsibility you want to demonstrate, you're going to create a project that lets you perform the work and then an artifact that shows how the result would be used. Those pieces should stay within one track, okay? Basically, an identity portfolio should focus on identity problems, while an incident response portfolio should stay centered on investigations. A clear focus makes your direction a whole lot easier to recognize. Now, the first half of that proof is going to come from the project itself, so we're going to kind of move on to this next slide and talk about it. So, the project shows you how to approach the work. Okay, it can be small and it doesn't necessarily need code when the responsibility is analytical or procedural. An incident response case study might, for instance, begin with suspicious activity and ask what the available information actually supports. What matters in this context is just reaching a reasonable conclusion without claiming more than what you found. That is the difference between using a tool and completing a project. The project gives the information a purpose, and then the artifact carries the result beyond the project. So let's get into talking about artifacts. So the artifact, the stuff that we were talking about before, basically turns your work into something that another person can use. A report allows someone to review your conclusion, while a runbook kind of helps another person respond to a similar situation. That kind of handoff is especially relevant at the entry level because you may not be the person who makes the final decision, but you can give the person who does enough information to move forward. For that handoff to be trusted, though, the reasoning behind it has to be visible. That is going to be where this stuff comes in. Basically, the easiest way to show that reasoning is to connect context, judgment, and proof all together. The situation explains what you are trying to solve, your judgment explains the information that led you to decide, and then that supporting files stuff kind of lets someone check that decision. Without that connections, screenshots are just images, all right? They can support an explanation, but they are not going to replace one. Now, those supporting files will be public, and they're also going to have to be oriented in a way that's safe to share. So let's kind of talk about safe sharing and all that stuff. What you're going to want to do is work from a separate public copy so that the original always stays protected. You'll remove real identities and credentials, then inspect screenshots and file information for details that are easier to miss. GitHub may warn you about exposing certain secrets, but it cannot necessarily decide whether you have permission to publish the material. If the work belongs to an employer, a school, or someone else, please create a fictional version instead. After the material is safe, the account holding it needs to be protected as well. Now, the project protects the information inside the work. The account protects your control over what you can publish. Use a professional username, limit the personal details that you expose, and kind of secure the account properly. The exact settings on here are on the slide, but the point is that the account should reflect the same care as the work inside it. With the account ready, the profile can show people where to begin. Now, the profile README should tell people what kind of work you are pursuing and which project they should open first. Keep that introduction short. It doesn't necessarily need your full background or a summary of every repository. It only needs enough context to make the featured links feel intentional. The setup on screen makes that introduction appear on your profile. From there, the project needs its own clear structure. Keeping each project in its own repository gives the work a clear boundary. Okay, the README basically can guide the reader through it while the finished result stays separate from the rough material. The exact folder names matter less than making the work easy to follow. Someone should be thinking about your conclusions, not trying to figure out where you put the dang report. That is why the project README matters so much. Now, Project README also explains what the files mean, beginning with the outcome and then showing how the information led you there. State anything that you could not confirm so that the conclusion stays within the limits of the work. The attached files should verify the explanation rather than forcing the reader to kind of reconstruct it. A usable template kind of makes the shape easier to repeat. So if you kind of want to look at the About README link here, kind of take a look at how to format everything, feel free to do so. Now, the template basically gives you just a starting structure, but every prompt needs to be replaced with your own work. Its purpose is to keep you from leaving out part of the explanation. The wording should also match the strength of what you found, so if something is only suggested, do not describe it as proven. And what you'll do after that is just kind of then point the reader towards the file that supports the result. The structure can stay pretty consistent across projects, but the reasoning should always remain specific to what that project said. Now, the commit history will kind of help show how that work developed. Each commit record kind of is a change, right? So the message attached to it should only say what actually became different. The message doesn't necessarily have to sound impressive, it just only has to make the history understandable. Clear messages show that the repository developed through deliberate updates instead of just kind of appearing as unexplained group files. When the individual projects can kind of stand on their own, the homepage kind of gives them one shared address. The homepage, obviously. Basically, it's here to kind of direct people towards your selected work. Repeating every project or adding an expensive design would really only make that route harder to follow. So, a short statement about your direction and a few clear links are pretty much clear enough. The project pages already contain the detail, and the starting material can really just remain on screen while we kind of focus on the page's purpose. After the page is assembled, it just needs to be published. Publishing turns the repository into a site someone else can visit. Follow the setup shown here, right? Wait for it to finish and then open the live address outside of the editor. That kind of check just confirms that the page loads and the project links go to where you intended. Until it works from the outside, you have a repository rather than a usable portfolio site. After the site works, you can kind of choose which project people should notice first. Now, what you'll do is pin the project that best matches the work that you want, then use another strong project to reinforce that direction. You don't necessarily need to fill every available space. A weaker project can distract from the one that you actually want someone to remember, so just kind of keep all of that stuff in mind. Now, with the strongest work leading the portfolio is pretty much ready to become part of your application. What you'll do is put the portfolio address on your resume and professional profile as well so that an employer can kind of reach it from the application. On the resume, what you'll do is just describe the result of the project instead of simply kind of announcing that you have a GitHub account. The resume will give the employer a reason to care, and then the portfolio is just going to give them somewhere else to actually examine the work. If they follow that link, you'll also need to be ready to talk about what they find. That means you should be able to explain the project in the same order that you documented it, okay? Focus on the decision you made, why you made it, and what you can't confirm. Be honest about where the project began as well. If you followed a tutorial, say so and explain what you changed about it. That demonstrates ownership without pretending that the entire idea began with you. So, before an employer sees any of this, give the finished portfolio one outside test. Basically, what you'll do is just open the portfolio in a private browser to kind of confirm that it works without your account access and that nothing private or things that you don't want them to see are there. Then what you'll do is just give it to someone who didn't build it and then kind of ask, what role they think it supports and what happened in one project. If they can't necessarily explain it, then their confusion shows you where more context is going to be needed. Because I'm a personal believer of like, if I explain something, I try to explain it to such a degree that it like even a 6-year-old could understand. The more descriptive you are and the more you leave, not for wandering, the better people can kind of understand your work and they can kind of follow your individual thought process. So all of this to say, if the portfolio works technically and makes sense to someone else, then it's going to be ready to share. You now have a portfolio that connects the work that you have done to the work that you want to do. Your resume still needs to needs to kind of give the employer a reason to open it, which is why in the next video, I'm going to kind of give you a cybersecurity resume template and show you how to make it fit your experience. So if you're applying to different jobs, you can kind of find ways to easily modify those things specifically for that job, because what we're seeing a lot of right now in the industry is specificity and wanting to use the words that were written in the what you calls it in the description of the job itself. So we will also kind of do that and then connect it back to the portfolio that you just built. So I hope this helped everybody, and if you want to build that resume with me, make sure you like, follow, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you guys in that one.